think we had a meeting with Warp Films, and they said, what have you got then? Cheap one, the middle one, and expensive one. They went, well, what about the cheap one? They said. So I went, all right. And they said, you know, and I've basically written Kill List over the Christmas holidays, over like a 2-week period, and I wrote draft 9 on the front. And I showed it to Warp, and I said, I've been working on this for years. This is my passion project. It's been gone through so many fucking drafts, you wouldn't believe it.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the BFI South Bank and the BFI London Film Festival. I'm obviously not Ben Wheatley. Just to truncate the introduction, there's a great introduction to Ben's work in the London Film Festival catalogue. Most of you here will know Ben emerged with his feature debut, Down Terrace, after what I thought was a terrific career in television. He's made 6 features in 7 years. He's quite prolific, and he's worked across various genres and imbued them all with his own kind of visual panache and brilliant. The format of today, Ben and I are going to talk with some clips. You'll get a chance to answer some questions at the end, and there are microphones for you all. It's being recorded. And as you probably also know, Free Fire, Ben's most recent film, won the Audience Award at Toronto, the Midnight Madness Award, and it's been chosen, we're given the honour of closing the London Film Festival this year. So without further ado, please welcome Ben Wheatley.
It's like Parkinson.
It is like Parkinson, isn't it?
I like it. I like the chairs. Thanks for coming, everyone. I was half worried I was going to come out to an empty room, to be honest, but that's brilliant.
I think they've paid people to come.
Yeah. I recognise some of these extras. I've worked with them before.
Extras. So before we start talking about some of the features, I mentioned at the start, and I don't know, how many people will know Ben's television work? Okay, I mean, I first come to your work through the stuff with The Amazing Wizards, which I live in Brighton, or did live in Brighton, where Ben lives, and it was amazing for me seeing that stuff. So I just wondered if you could talk about the kind of beginnings of your career, the television stuff and the Amazing Wizard stuff, because I see the stuff that you worked with Robin Hill. I see a lot of that in your features, and obviously if people don't know it, that's not going to make a lot of sense, but the kind of anarchic humour, the brilliant use of special effects. Just talk a little bit about your career before we got to Down Terrace.
I started off at college, and I made short films at college, and I was kind of that generation that was still part of the, you know, applying for money to get 16mm projects off the ground, and the perceived wisdom was you make a 16mm short film, and then you use that as a calling card to move through the industry. And I never had any money, and never could afford any of that stuff, you know. So we'd shoot lots of stuff on video, but then you end up being shown in pubs in Deptford and to like 30 people, and you're going, fuck yeah, you know, maybe 40 next time in a year's time, and that was it. And you'd go occasionally apply to the BFI for money, and it seemed impenetrable, you know, and the same with Film 4 and all those things. So I kind of I almost had given up, and then I got involved in doing stuff online at the very early beginnings of online, and I kind of I had to learn Flash animation because it was the only way of putting moving image up on the internet while the bandwidth was slow, which feels like a million years ago now, but it wasn't that long ago. But
Dialing up.
Yeah, and so I did a lot of animation. And it's kind of, I've got on my biographies and stuff that I was an animator, and it's an incredible insult to animators to say that. You know, I have so few skills at animation, but I did it because it was the least out of organisation that you need to do. I didn't need to get anybody in a room to film them. I could do it all myself, and do the voices and do the whole thing. So I made a lot of stuff like that. And that, as the internet got quicker, it kind of, there was a chance to put video on, and the first thing that I made was with Rob Hill, and it was called Cunning Stunt, and it was a guy kind of jumping over cars, jumps over a car, and he goes brilliant, and then he gets run over by another car coming in the opposite direction, and it was we made it really quick. It's like it took us about half an hour to make it, and we showed it to Rob's dad. and he like fell off his chair laughing. It was like the thing in, was it the Monty Python, the greatest joke of all time? It was just like, he went, ah, ah, ah. I'm like, fuck, this is strong, this thing's good. And we put it online, and within like a couple of days, it'd have like 1 million hits or something. It went absolutely ballistic, and it went for years. This thing was huge, and that was the beginning of going, okay, I don't need to. I like to travel to Deptford to the pub, but now I don't need to do that. I can do it from the house, and the audience is ginormous, and so that kind of re-energised me basically. And as the bandwidth got quicker, then the clips got longer.
The amazing axe trick is the one that I always liked. And Rob Hill is someone that you continue to work with. I mean, he's in the early clips. Obviously, he's in Down Terrace, which we're going to go on to talk about. But he's someone that you continue to collaborate with, and that's something else that I see as a bit of a characteristic of your work. You tend to work with people, and then you continue the collaboration. Yeah,
well, Rob to me was massively inspiring because he was making film. My background is not. When you hear about Spielberg and all these guys, not drawing comparisons, I'm just saying.
Right.
You hear about Spielberg and all these guys, and they start off by going, "Oh yeah, my dad gave me a camera and we filmed stuff and yada yada yada, and we made short films with all our friends." And I never did any of that, but Rob did. And him and his mates, when they were like 12, 13, remade action movies, and they remade Batman and stuff themselves, and they did all the stunts and all this kind of stuff. So when I went to college, I met up with him, and he showed me all this stuff. I was like, fuck, man, this is amazing, And then he and Andy Hurst and Mike Hurst got together, and they made a movie called Project Assassin, which they were like basically sixth formers, and they made a feature film, and they took it to Cannes and they sold it. And it was just like, I didn't think you could, and that for me, Down Terrace is an extension of that. Finally, we get around to it like 15 years later and do that version of it. But they were, to me, like the kind of pioneers of, like punk pioneers of independent filmmaking. Their film was the first video film to be put onto film to have a film transfer as well. I mean, it's completely lost that film now, but it was incredible to see it. That you could just, through gumption, no connections, and just through sheer bollocks, you could just make something and get it in the cinema.
And from that period, how did Down Terrace come about? I mean, your debut feature, I remember seeing that at a festival. I think I saw it at Dinard, actually.
Right.
And it just felt so fresh and new, as a lot of your films do. But it's a film that was it's one of those films that almost was a bit ahead of its time. I know Nick Rogue is one of your filmmaking heroes, and it's a film which has taken time to catch up with it. It did very well at festivals, but people came to that film quite late. Luckily, it's for sale in the shop, isn't it? We noticed that.
It is.
It is. I mean, there we are. What a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah.
How many of you have seen Down Terrace?
There you go.
Quite a lot of people. There's a few sales.
But one copy's never enough with that film. It's odd. You do realise this is basically an upselling seminar.
Yeah, every film's for sale in there.
Yeah, it's interesting because we finally just about broken even on Down Terrace. So if you buy it now, I might actually get some money from it. Maybe like, I think it's like 6p or something I get on each one, which is...
Every little helps, as
well,
they say.
Exactly.
So from going from the Amazing Wizard stuff and the stuff with Rob Hill, who is in Down Terrace and a big part of it, how did the Down Terrace genesis come about? How did you move into making your first feature?
Well, Rob and I had made a load of shorts around the same time. We'd been inspired a lot by Feston and the Dogma stuff.
Yeah.
Because now when we found out that Feston was like shot on a PC-1 Sony little camcorder as big as a fag packet, we were like, fuck, we can buy one of those things. They're not that expensive. So, and I had one through where I was working, and so we started shooting movies on that. But still, it's still not quite the right time, So we'd make these really grotty handheld camcorder movies, and we'd show them to people, and they'd just go, because it's tough. And so we did that for a long time. And then through the internet, because I'd made a lot of stuff that got a lot of traffic, I ended up, quite a long story short, I ended up doing some TV stuff. Right. And we ended up in Manchester doing Making Ideal, which is a Johnny Vegas sitcom thing. And I'd written like a half-hour version of Down Terrace called Like Father, Like Son, which was we were thinking of making. And then, but Rob and I, in the meantime, had written a lot of spec scripts for Hollywood, and sent them off and always got rejected. And we'd written about 7 or 8 scripts, and we thought, well, I felt, we're never going to get anywhere until one of these things is made, because we think we're fucking great. But the actual reality is, until one of these scripts is made, you've no idea how good you are as a writer. It's just, you can't, until you see it, it's just a lonely thing, a script that's not made. So I thought, well, we'll write something that we can make ourselves within, and usually the process with that is like, you go on those writing courses and they said, what's your dream, man? What's your fucking dream? Write down your dream. You're from your imagination, and people going, oh yeah, it's like in the 60s, and it's like a fucking, I know a girl group, and it opens in a gig, and da 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 da. You're fucked straight away. You're never going to do any of that stuff because it's too complicated. So we started the other way around with what have we got, and we had a house, and we had Rob, we had Rob's dad, and I'd met a load of actors through doing telly. And I met Laurie Rose, the DOP, and he was in Brighton and made a terrible mistake where in the early days of Facebook, we become Facebook friends, and he posted something that said, if you've got a script, I've got a crew, right. and I had a script, and he thought it was going to be a short, right. And it was Down Terrace, and so we got all those people together and we made it. And
did you carry? I mean, you mentioned the car trick, which reappears in Down Terrace.
And in Sightseers.
Yeah, I mean, for God's sake, will you move on?
No, I can't. It's the one effect I know. It's like, yeah.
But you kind of carried on some of the way that you worked. I mean, I mentioned it in the bumbling intro. There's a kind of an anarchic element to your films that I really like. There's a comedy. There's a darkness, and some of that in Down Terrace is very obviously a lineage from the way that you were working with Rob Hill before. There's an improvisatory sense as well. Did you want to continue all that, or was it just because it was your first film and you didn't know another way to work?
No, because we'd done a load of telly, so we'd worked in a very tight and disciplined way. Ideal was very. I had a massive amount of freedom with the image, but I had no freedom at all with the script, and for good reason, because it was really well written. So. But at the same time, Rob and I had done loads of really wild improvisation, just completely making stuff up films for a long time, which were all awful, but they were good fun to make, And so we liked that side of it, and we wanted to make something that was like that. So while we were doing the first series of Ideal that we did, Rob was an editor on it, and we would just hash out this script, and then in between, I think I did series 5 and 6, and in between those two series of Ideal, we made Down Terrace in the middle, and that was like almost like a kind of antidote to the experience of doing a TV. It was just totally free, and it was free in a lot of different ways. It's like we never applied for any money for it, so we never went through any process where we had to go to a local funding body and sit in front of someone and explain to them what we wanted to do, because I was totally fucking allergic to that, and I didn't want to have to deal with it. I didn't want anybody's notes on it. I just wanted to make it, and if it was a fuck up, then it was ours, not someone else's. And then we got together with Andy Stark.
Who's here?
He's here somewhere. He was the producer, and has been the producer ever since. And he brought a fantastic amount of organisation to our rather chaotic world, And so we basically sat down and went, right, okay. It's like, how long is it going to take to shoot this thing? And we decided on 8 days, because it was we reckoned it was the most amount of days you could take off from a month as a freelancer and still afford your mortgage. So we worked backwards from that, right. And then divided the script by 8 days, and that's how many pages we had to shoot per day, and then we just did it. And we figured that it was shot like a documentary, because I thought about stuff like the Primary, the documentary Primary, which is a feature-length documentary shot in 3 days. Well, okay. And a football match is a documentary shot in 90 minutes, isn't it? And it's a feature-length documentary. It's not a very interesting story often, but it's still a film, kinda. So we figured that if we imagined our drama was a documentary, then we would probably be able to shoot it all right. If we suddenly thought we were going to make a Scorsese movie, then we'd be fucked, So that was how it came about.
And I remember when I saw it, and I remember reading the reviews to do some preparation for this. The Guardian seemed obsessed with comparing you to Mike Leigh.
Yeah.
It's like an obsession with The Guardian.
It's a physical thing.
I think it is. Maybe they don't know that you're different people. But I remember the Guardian saying, you know, Down Terrace, it's Mike Leigh meets The Sopranos.
Yeah.
And the thing I like about Down Terrace, it's a crime story, but it's set in a really I grew up in the street. Like, it's like something you could imagine happening in your. Yeah. Did you want it to have that kind of sense of? I don't know if I'm trying to imbue too much into. Did you want it to have that kind of sense of realism? I mean, there's a realism to the crime.
Yeah.
In that. I mean, it's just basically idiots hurting each other, isn't it? In lots
I was
of
about
ways.
to say what we felt was that we hadn't got our own experience on screen,
right,
and we wanted to see it.
Right. Sorry.
But unfortunately, jumped in and insulted me horribly. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's. You know, I felt, you know, from my 20s, I was feeling like, I didn't recognise anyone on screen. My experience wasn't wasn't there. And I knew people like this, and I knew that world, that Brighton world of drugs and stuff, and petty criminals a bit. You know, not that I was involved in it or anything, but it was just I could see it, and I figured, you know, it was a rich and detailed world, and the idea of a kind of, you know, where the hippies intersected with crime is quite a interesting space, and how drug dealing actually the script had grown out of another script that Rob and I had written, which was very much a kind of procedural thing about drug dealing and how it happened in Brighton from the 60s onwards. But that film had been made a lot, really, really well with big budgets, and we kind of thought, well, fuck it, we've done all the research, we'll do the story around the story.
The other thing about that film, and again I see it as a kind of recurring, is you're very good at showing adults that are. And this won't insult you, I don't think. I haven't called you an idiot.
I'm very thin-skinned.
You're very sensitive now.
Yeah.
It's, you kind of have adults that basically have guns and knives, and yet really they're just children, aren't they? I mean, they're like infants. They're.
Yeah, but I think everyone's like that. I don't see that as a.
No, but that's the thing that I think that's the thing that makes it funny. I mean, when the scene where Michael Smiley is executed, it's almost like he's being taken out for a trip into the... And then he can't believe it. It's like, I thought we were going on a drive and you're going to kill me?
Yeah,
and then he reacts like... He tries to run away, doesn't he? Which is...
It's a reasonable response, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so, yeah. Should we take a look at the clip?
Yeah,
So if we can have the first clip, please. We deliberately tried to choose the clip with the most swearing. It's like it must have inspired the Dan sequence from Alan Partridge.
I think Dan predates this.
Does it?
To be fair, yeah.
Right, I'll get my coat. So I've called you an idiot. I've got that right.
I know, it's not going well, is it?
God, no, I'll never be asked back. Let's move on to Kill List, because I mentioned at the start, Down Terrace was a film which was screened to acclaim at festivals. You know, it came out. You know, it did come out in cinemas, but Kill List was the one that really kind of signalled, I think, the arrival of something. And I remember it's the first time I met you and the first time I interviewed you for Kill List, which was terrifying, because the actor from it, Stu and Roger, turned up.
Yeah.
He's not here, is he?
Probably. He's always turns up at these things. He rocked up on stage, didn't he, and started criticising the film, which was quite funny.
Oh, man. That was something.
He's very opinionated, Stu.
He's very opinionated. But he's a very scary man.
Yeah.
So I remember when I spoke to you for that film that you said that some of the ideas that had formed in the making of Down Terrace, you already had an idea of what you wanted to do with Kill List, how you wanted to go on with your next feature. Can you just talk us through some of the ideas that you had and some of the elements of Down Terrace and the way that you wanted to keep, and some of the things that you wanted to change, maybe subvert a little bit?
I think, well, first of all, we came out of Down Terrace, and I realised I probably, if I didn't have a script going forward, the first question, if we're going to be asked a question, we were hoping it was going to be this question: what do you want to do next? And if we weren't prepared, if I wasn't prepared for it, that the whole thing would grind to a halt. So, sat down and wrote 3 scripts: a cheap one, a medium one, and an expensive one. And Andy had said, please write a horror film, because he'd said that before when we made Down Terrace. He goes, no one likes British crime films. Don't make a British crime film, please don't do that. So I ignored him because I like him, but he was right. So I'm a big fan of horror films as well, so it wasn't a problem. So wrote these 3 scripts, and then I think we had a meeting with Warp Films, and they said, what have you got then? Cheap one, a middle one, an expensive one. They went, well, what about the cheap one? They said. So I went, all right. And they said, and I've basically written Kill List over the Christmas holidays, over like a 2-week period, and I wrote draft 9 on the front. And I showed it to Warp, and I said, I've been working on this for years. This is my passion project. It's been gone through so many fucking drafts, you wouldn't believe it. So Anyway, so that's that one, and it went through the system really quick, you know, but it was still cheap as chips, you know. But in comparison to Down Terrace, which was £6,000 to shoot it, ended up costing 20 because we foolishly put a Karen Dalton track in it, which is a very harsh lesson in music rights and the cost therein. But to actually make it was 6, and Kill List was, I think, £700,000 budget. So we thought we'd won the lottery. It was like it's the biggest, you know, this is like Hollywood to us at that point. And everyone else involved in it was going, Jesus, they're going to do it for that much money? Wow, good luck, you know. But we you know, and it was designed basically like the first third of it is Down Terrace again. So we knew how to do that, which is people who are arguing in houses. So that's a genre, a subgenre. And the second third of it is people in hotels, which is cheap as well. And then the third bit was a bit more of into the unknown, which was shooting outdoors and a bit of action. So that was the worry bit. So yeah, so that, and basically wanted to take the same way of working, same team, exactly the same crew, and not change any of that, because I felt it'd really work well. And one of the things I found as well, I think I didn't really appreciate how good Laurie Rose was until quite a time after Down Terrace. And because we'd done it, Down Terrace had all been done in such a fever dream and done like really quick, and we couldn't quite believe we'd done it. And then we watched the edit back and went, oh shit, there's a film in there, that's okay, all right. And then I started looking more at what he'd shot and going, oh, his eye's really brilliant, you know. And then we kind of continued. We thought, well, there's nothing's broken about this, we won't try and fix it. So exactly the same kind of methodology was brought over from Down Terrace, and that was to do, and some of that was to do with performance stuff, where we would go, you know, I want to, you know, we got the script, but you know, there's stuff in the script. So, and I'm a believer in this, that there's no, you know, bad acting is often the script, because you write stuff that actors can't ever say without sounding like an idiot, and it makes, and it, you know, things that people have never said in the history of humanity, poor actors have to say out loud, you know. So I thought that, and I'd kind of looked at how Armando Nucci had been working on Thick of It, where he'd do like on-script stuff, and then he'd do improvisational, like paraphrase passes, not completely changing the script, but changing it, putting it back into their own, the performer's own meter. So we did that we started doing that on Down Terrace, and we carried it on to Kill List as well. So you do a take on the script, a take off the script, on the script, off the script, always going back, and by doing that, the kind of the wild improv version would feed into the straight version, backwards and forwards, and then you get all sorts of stuff in there, which was useful.
I mean, the other thing which is really interesting about that film is, you know, you mentioned the crime. It's kind of a hitman film initially. Then it takes, and I love films that do this, then it takes a kind of different route and it goes into horror territory. And I remember you saying that you'd always wanted to make a horror film because there weren't that many that you found scary.
Yeah. And
I remember seeing Kill List for the first time, and there's something almost unquantifiable about it that is terrifying. I think it is partly down to Stu and Roger, who, having met, it is a genuinely terrifying. Is
that you're just putting that Q&A back onto the film?
Yeah.
It's a unique experience you've had with it.
I've been wetting myself for nights on end after that Q&A. But it does kind of segue. I mean, was it difficult to kind of handle that? There's not that many films that do that start off as one thing and then go into a completely different territory. Was that something that was enjoyable about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember. I mean, I remember how the script came about, and that was to do with casting initially. It was like I'd worked with Neil Maskell, and I'd worked with Michael Smiley and Mianna Björing on The Wrong Door, which is another BBC show, and I always wanted to work with them again. I thought they were brilliant, and I thought, how do I get Michael Smiley and Maskell together? Who are they? You know, as the odd couple, and then put them together, and then I thought, I like Mianna, or maybe she could be married to Neil, and then it built out like that. And then the idea of it being a horror film, I kind of started writing down lists of things I'm scared of and like nightmares I'd had, and kind of tried to build those into it. So it was kind of, it wasn't like a kind of a tale that was told. So, and I think it kind of built itself out of that, really.
You do. I mean, you do cast it really. People quite, sometimes people say who's your favourite actor, and it's never Robert De Niro. Although I like him again after he criticised Trump so eloquently.
Yeah.
But Michael Smiley, I think, is one of the best actors at the moment. I think he's terrific. And in this film, you're right. They're like a sinister Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, the way that they go around killing people. But Smiley is someone. I know you've worked with Haskell again, but Smiley obviously has a really big role in your new film, which we'll discuss later on, Pre-Fire. What is it about Michael Smiley? Because he seems to me, and again in Field in England, he's very good at doing the kind of jokey stuff, but there's also a kind of like a menace to him. It's probably more in Neil in this film actually, but he seems to me to be very eclectic in the way that he's able to work.
Yeah, I just think he's volatile, Michael. His performances, he can go very quickly from being friendly to being scary and then back again, and I like that. And we've been building on that kind of performance style for a long time, because I think that life is not as scary as Michael Smiley can be, but it's kind of...
It's not as scary as Stu and Roger.
No, but it kind of goes backwards and forwards. Like you could be, you could have an argument, a massive screaming row, and then be very pleasant to someone, and then back again out of it, and then into it, and if you would go to a story conference type thing and look at arcs of characters, people would look completely insane. You go, well, they've got to build, and they change over time. But real life is like this, up and down. It's fucking, it's moody and sulky, and then it's like you do something kind for someone, and you're really snide to someone else. I'm talking about myself, obviously, and it's complicated. And I thought that's what I wanted to, and that's what Michael can do really well.
I mean, the other thing that always impressed me with Kill List is the way that you use sound. I think the use of sound really adds, especially as it goes into that darker territory.
Yeah.
So obviously something that on that film, not that you wouldn't on that film, you obviously paid a really lot of attention. I remember this very jarring kind of violin sound which comes in as it starts to build. Was that something that you were very much keen to have as an element of that
yeah,
film?
well, Martin Pavey has done all the sound design, all the films I've done. The dark secret was I wasn't there for the sound design of Damn Terrace, because I was on a job somewhere.
Right.
And it was all done. I heard it down the phone and said, "What do you reckon?" I'm like, "All right, sounds good." And that was it, So I was excited to get into the sound mix of Kill List. And Pavey had dug up this fucking stuff. It was horrible. It was like whales talk to each other. He'd found shark song. Shark song is a sound you never want to hear.
Right.
They're not sweet. And so there's a lot of shark song in them. And I think our back brain, whatever it is, the reptilian brain, doesn't like the sound of shark song. So when you hear it in Kill List, it terrifies
Especially
you.
when it's turned up really loud. I'm just keeping an eye on time. The other thing with Kill List, and I'm going to talk about this a bit more, or you are, with Sightseers, is I think you're very good at taking kind of mundane elements of life. I mean, the whole thing with the soap is the soap in the wrapper. The gravy jug, which leads to this huge explosion and argument in a dinner party scene. But I think the other thing which Kill List does, it takes a look at a Britain. It's almost a kind of a documentary style, very homogenised, characterless hotels that they stay in, horrible Burnley Inn type restaurants. It's kind of shows Britain as quite, as it is, I'm afraid, quite dull, doesn't it? Was that? Did you? I'm not saying, but did you kind of want to say, look, this is how I think that Britain?
Well, I think there's the life of the commercial traveller is not a happy one.
It's grim, isn't it?
That's the thing. But I mean, I think it was more. I was just cross. I was cross about the betrayal of the political side of it, of the war. And that we've been led again and again into these wars, which were just bullshit, and it just didn't. The guys in the military are going out and doing this job, and then they're coming back, and being a kid in the 70s, the Second World War is like a massive thing, and it's a massive and it's sold to you as a narrative of a completely black hat, white hat, totally just war, and I imagine that the Neil Maskell's character is that he completely buys into that, but by the time he gets involved in this, it's that there's so many grey areas in what they've been sold that it starts to, it unravels his head, and he comes back to the UK and he's like, well, why did we do any of this stuff? And it's a very small baby steps from being like, a soldier to being a mercenary, and then from a mercenary just to being a killer, and then why are these things, one is right and one is right by our society, one's completely wrong, but they're kind of the same job. So, and it was the confusion of that, and that's what I was interested in. I mean, I think the the look of the place. I'm not saying that England is an ugly, horrible place, because I think Sightseers is the other side of that, which is where it just depends where you go and shoot. You know, they were going from place to place and staying in hotels, so that is a bit grim.
Yeah, you should see where I'm staying tonight. It's really grim. Let's, if we can have the second clip, if we can have a clip from Kill List, please. You know, I remember seeing that film, and it really, you get these moments when you watch something, whether it's from a British director or from someone forever, where you watch something and you feel like you're watching something new. And the thing that always I really liked about it is it felt like something new and fresh. And I think that's something that also carried into your next film, Sightseers. And before we talk in more detail, I want to talk a little bit about Amy Jump, because I know you never liked to. And
What? I never.
What? Me?
What? Me?
And I actually am not sure Amy Jump exists, because nobody's ever met her and seen you.
I've met her. I'm married to her.
I know you are, but you know we only have your word for it because she's never with you. But Amy Jump, obviously, Amy works with you both as a writer and as a
editor,
and as an editor as well.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a bit about that collaboration, because it's one of the other key collaborators I think in your career.
Yeah, I mean, we work very differently on every project, really, in terms of writing. Sometimes it's I'll write the script and she'll come in and reconfigure the dialogue. Sometimes I'll write a script, I'll write the first draft, and she'll write over the top of it, you know, so and change it a bit. And sometimes she'll come in and totally destroy the draft I've written, and I have to take my name off the script. So there's lots of different ways, or she'll write one completely on her own. So and then in the edit, I kind of operate the machine like a traditional editor would, and she sits behind me like the director would, and tells me what to do. And then I filter that through, and try not to break up her thought process too much with mine, but still control it to a degree. And I think that's kind of unique. The writer being in the edit suite is a big deal, you know, and really important. And you know, they say like the final draft of a script is in the edit suite a lot of the time, but then it's done by an editor. And I don't know, you know, no disrespect to editors, but how they get the right to do that on top of a writer. So she writes the scripts in a very specific way that she knows she's going to cut them. So she'll write fat into them and exposition into them that she knows she's going to chop out. And it's quite interesting, you know, she has control over it. You know? But she also, because she thinks very visually, it's you know, it's not like just desperately holding on to the lines. It's a kind of a visual sense that's in the writing, but also in the editing as well. So the craziest stuff in Kill List is her.
Right.
The really extreme stuff is her in terms of the cutting, and then montage is more my end usually.
And with Sightseers, obviously, you enter into that equation the fact that the film had written contributions from the two leads, Steve Oram and Alice Lowe.
Yeah.
How did that? I mean, they're a great pair, and I don't know if any of you haven't seen it. Steve Oram's with 8 A's.
8, yes.
Is well worth checking out. And Alice Lowe.
Prevenge, of course, yeah.
And Prevenge, which we'll talk about in a bit. Yeah. But I mean, so how did that dynamic come into it with Steve and Alice contributing? Because it's kind of, in terms of genre, I guess it's a kind of got a road movie element, and a lot of the best road movies, Wim Wenders used to write his road movies, although he didn't have people wearing crocheted knickers in his...
you don't know, though.
Well, he might have been wearing them. But, you know, it has that kind of road movie element. How did that work with Steve and Alice contributing to the characters?
Well, it started off with I got called in to Big Talk, which is the Naira Park, Edgar Wright company. They did Shaun of the Dead and Spaced and all that stuff. And they said, we've got a script, do you want to do it? And it's by Steve and Alice. And I was like, well, I know them, I've worked with them before. And I just said yes. I didn't read it. So it's kind of a dramatic pour of the water in the middle of this anecdote. So I said, yeah, cool, that sounds great. But it was taken on with in the understanding that there'd be a lot of improvisation in it, because I really fancied doing something that was full of improv, and they are brilliant improvisers. So I worked with them on comedy stuff before I knew it. And so it kind of gone from there. I wrote back a basic kind of statement of intent of how I was going to deal with it, and how it was going to be a jumping off point for stuff, and everyone kind of agreed on that. And then there was a rewrite of the script that Amy did on top of their one, And then we went from there, really, and we shot as much as Apocalypse Now, which is 125 hours of stuff.
Really?
No helicopters in it, but
no
lots
helicopters, yeah. Or Marlon Brando.
Yeah, but it was, just we'd shoot the scenes out and then wouldn't call cut, and they'd wander off, and we'd follow them about and see what they got up to, and with the whole, it was crazy with the crew, like a snake behind, just seeing where they went, and they'd go off into fields, and just these takes could be like half an hour long of them just fucking about, or we'd find a location, we'd see something we liked and go over and shoot a scene around it that was completely made up, like all the stuff with the weird bear bin that they throw food into is something we saw, and the swings was something, anyway, all that stuff. And then there was some other nice stuff where we basically, like the mum's house at the start, we dressed the rooms, usually you'd dress the rooms that you needed for the script, and that would be it. But we had the whole house, so we dressed every room in the house. And there was like all the stuff in her bedroom, that was not written. So we just went around the house and go, what can happen in here, what can happen in there? And so, anyway, so we shot tons. And there was, I think it was the assemble edit of the film was 4 hours, which was brutal. It was just really bad. And and then Ames and I got to it and cut it down to 90.
And was that a difficult, given the way that you shot it and given the amount of material that was that a difficult film to get down to what finally emerged on screen? You didn't nearly get divorced.
No, I mean it's very shouty. Usually our edit, we can see that Mum, let's. That's me.
Right.
So there's a lot of like fucking what, fucking have it. Why doesn't it work? I've just cut that, I don't want to recut it now, that kind of crap. But it all stays up in the loft where we go downstairs and we don't talk about it.
Right, you just go down and have a cup of tea. So we've had an insight into Ben's filmmaking career and his marriage today.
Yeah.
So it's two for the
These things you can't separate them out because the films are all about our marriage, always.
Yeah.
You can see it in it. I mean, the thing what I love in Sightseers is like it's the story of a man and a woman, and the man has a passion, and the woman sees that passion and then does it as well as him, and then does it better than him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not saying nothing.
Yeah. The other thing that strikes me with that film is I think that your work, and we've seen it certainly in the Down Terrace clip. You're very good at looking at the kind of link between kind of domestic relationships and again and violence. I mean, the family relationships in your film are often there's this real kind of undertow of violence beneath them. Again, without wishing to try and turn this into a therapy session for your marriage, is that something as a subject that continues to interest you? Because you do have it where it's almost on a knife edge that all of a sudden it will flip. And in the relationship between Steve and Alice's characters in Sightseers, it's pleasant, it goes along, they start to kill people, as you do when you go on holiday in a caravan.
Yeah. It's a high-pressure situation.
It's a high-pressure situation. Yeah. And then it becomes, it's almost like an addiction to this, and it's almost like they're inspiring
Well,
each
it's
other.
nice to do stuff together, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to find that middle ground, that safe space.
And there's someone to clean up after the violence as well, which helps. But it does seem to be something that you return to again and again, this kind of domesticity and how it can switch into something more.
Yeah. I'm assuming it's a
Yeah, absolutely.
now I'm going to choke.
Right.
I'm assuming it's a thing we all understand. That's the give and take of relationships. There's the histrionics and the tenderness and selfishness and giving. And I think I've always tried to make films that are, they're genre films, but they're genre films of characters that have a broader kind of humanity, which you don't see as much.
And in terms of the visual template, sorry, I'm not looking at my watch because it's just I realised that we're rapidly. It's a very different look to this film with Sightseers. I mean, Kill List was quite dark. Sightseers is lots of primary colours, lots of brightness, blues, pastels, and I much as I'm scared of Struan, I'm also scared of the knitted underwear that Alice Lowe knits. Anyway, sort of a terrible Reader's Wives, 1970s aesthetic. Why did you decide on that look for the film? It kind of accentuates the kind of, there's a kind of almost like a hyper element to the violence.
I think I was reacting to the experience of going to those places. I think I hadn't I really hadn't been to the lakes. I hadn't
Right.
been there, and I thought it was amazing when I got there. And and a lot of these things are about, the making of a film is a lot of it's witnessing it. It's not like building a cabinet or something unless you're Hitchcock or someone clever, where you plan it and then you build it. Sometimes it's about making an atmosphere and then finding it, and you find it all around you. And that's certainly something that was in Sightseers, is that we were just blown away by it, and we had incredible, and it gave us stuff all the time. There's stuff in it where we turn up in the morning and Laurie, Rose and I'd run out and go, like, everyone's having breakfast, and go, fuck, well, look at that. Oh my God, look at all that fog. Let's go and film it. And we'd drag Alice and Steve out and just put them on a hill somewhere and film them, and the scene where Steve kills the guy on top of the hills was the greatest sunrise I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, Laurie and I was standing on the top of this thing going, I can't fucking believe this. I've never seen anything like it. It was like something from 2001, this kind of massive disc coming up, and you could see for miles, and and the day before it had just been completely overcast and fucked. So we were just rolling with that experience, because it was a road movie. We shot it on the road, we shot it on the move, so we were we were kind of living it without the murders.
Yeah, one would hope. There might be a trail of bodies. Someone in my office brought me back one of those big pencils from the pencil museum.
I love the pencil museum.
Yeah, it's great.
It's closed down now, I think. Got
Is it gone, is it?
flood damage,
Right.
yeah. But they had got the world's biggest pencil. They had the world's second biggest pencil. And they had the world's third biggest pencil. They had all these big pencils.
They kind of cornered the market in.
Yeah, they'd
in
got
pencil.
them all there. It was incredible.
Okay, let's take a look at a clip from Sightseers.
Yeah.
So, Field in England,
Yeah.
the next film. Field in England was slightly different in that it was your first period film.
Yeah.
And I remember interviewing you again for this, and I said, how did you approach it differently? You said you bought lots of big hats.
Yes.
So can we have a different answer? Because that's a very funny answer. But let's
How did
start.
I approach it differently?
No,
Yeah.
the answer. But let's talk about the research that you did, because obviously when you go back into a period of history,
Yeah.
the Civil War setting, the kind of necromancy, the kind of alchemy, was there more involved in the writing of Field in England than there was in some of the other, in terms of the research you had to do?
It was a lot of fear, because we knew we'd make this film and then I'd have to go and do the Q&As for it, and I didn't want to get crucified by historians.
Right.
And Amy was the same. Well, Amy wrote it, so she was it was very nervy writing it, because the problem is the words we use all the time are come into existence at certain times, So there's a line in it which we had murders over, which was envelope. And envelopes the envelope, the word doesn't come into existence until about 5 years after the Civil War. We're like, fuck. Well, maybe they were using it in common use before it hit the dictionary, and we're like, but the dictionary didn't exist. Fuck. So it stuff like that was really, sent Ames slightly mad, worrying about it. So yeah, we did a lot of, she did a lot of research around it, but we're not academics, so it's kind of, it's nerve-wracking.
But you also, I mean, the period you portray it as a very kind of nasty, brutish, and short.
There's a surprise,
Yeah. We would have thought that. But you do kind of capture that. It wouldn't have been a nice period to have lived in. I wouldn't.
No, well, I think what was really fascinating about it was that it was a moment in flux, for the country, and you have to be careful about this, but from a British bubble perspective, it's kind of quite an important world moment, of like the beginning of the overthrow of the king and the beginning of kind of democracy, This kind of talk doesn't fly when you're doing Q&As all around the world. They'll go, what are you fucking talking about? No one knows about this shit. But it's, I felt it was a massive moment for in our history. But also what was interesting, when I started reading up on it, there's loads of, it could have gone so many different ways, and there's all kinds of manner of characters roaming around that were having other ideas that were consigned to the footnotes of history that never got anywhere with it. And there was so we were reading stuff about treasure hunts where people were taking large amounts of money off people to maraud about digging things up, which they had no idea where they were, And then the other stuff was this kind of the taking of the beginning of science and the ironing out of magic out of science. And that's, really fascinating.
It's quite a lot to get in. I mean, and also, and I'm noticing more and more as we go through, again, the look of the film very different. You work with Laurie Rose again, who I know we've mentioned, who I think is a brilliant cinematographer. Black and white, and lots of tableau shot. You know, there's lots of to reflect the period. Just say a little bit more about
the tableau stuff was written in by Amy. That was a specific thing from her, and she wanted to, initially she wanted to do woodcuts, and then she kind of developed out of that into developed into tableau, and I was interested in it because it felt like the whole approach to the film was that the film was outside the period where film exists, so film rules don't necessarily have to apply to it. So we're thinking, well, maybe tableau's the way forward, that they, you know, in this, when films were made then, this is a device that they would use. So we kind of thought about it in those terms. But the other thing that's developed, a dull kind of technical thing, is that Laurie and I had come from TV, and the period that we were in when we were making TV was that most TV shot on, like, up until recently, it was shot on basically news cameras. You know, everything was shot on news cameras. So, and the lenses on the news cameras were very long, and you could never get shallow depth of field with them. So, as TV people, as soon as we come off that and get hold of prime lenses, which allows you to kind of, you know, make that kind of lovely thing where everything goes like this, basically all this bokeh, weird soft stuff behind people. So we just jumped straight on that, and so Down Terrace is all shot really extreme shallow focus, and it was only by the time we got to Field in England that we'd kind of gotten over ourselves a bit, and the focus had got broader. It's quite dull, this, I know.
No, my eyes glazed over only momentarily.
You were dying inside there a bit. It's important to me.
But also the other thing with this film is that I think it's the first time you start to. I mean, the psychedelic sequences. I just think I could watch them again. I mean, if I'm being honest, and you haven't asked me, this is probably my favourite of your films.
We're just going to stop after this one now, then.
Yeah, we're just going to leave it on a high. But you know, so because were they done? Because I imagine it wasn't a big budget film. Were those some of those effects? Were they done? How did you manage to achieve those? Because obviously, given your background that you've had in animation, that we've spoken about, you're obviously very good at making a virtue out of necessity.
Yeah, I mean, some of the fast cutting stuff is stuff I'd worked on since college. So I'd cut stuff like that, made those kinds of very fast cutting or similar images cut over the top of themselves. Stuff I'd been doing since the 90s. So I've been thinking about that. But also, I was a fan of stuff like, you know, Towers Open Fire and the Burroughs cut-up movies and stuff, and I'd seen all that stuff, and I wanted to feed that kind of thing into it. And I'd experimented a lot with the fast cutting stuff, and I felt that the experience you got from it was this, instead of like fast montage we've all seen, or lots of different images really quickly we've all seen, but the idea that you're dealing with two streams of images at the same time, and the persistence of vision thing, they're both still working. They're both at 12 frames when you split it in half like that, but then you're having to unpack them in your head in different parts of your brain at the same time, and it made me feel like it was the physiological effect of that sometimes I might have had off of taking psychedelic drugs.
If you had have taken.
No, I have taken them.
Right.
Lots of them, yeah.
And also, but not today.
Not today. I'm an old man.
Yeah. But you also, I mean,
recovery from it was too much.
You introduced, I mean, Rhys Shearsmith, who's become somebody else. That, I mean, he's brilliant in this film because he has this kind of, he thinks he's above it all because he has this kind of intellect. But he's, I mean, the clip that we're going to see, which we should possibly just show, is another terrifying moment. I was working with Rhys. I mean, I imagine you were a fan of his work from League of Gentlemen.
Yeah, a massive fan of his work, and what Rhys brings is an incredibly in-depth knowledge of horror cinema and the occult and magic and all this stuff. So, and also, apart from that, he's an incredibly hard-working, and he's like an incredible precision tool. Rhys, he's amazing, you know. So, and he was just. I mean, again, it was written for him specifically.
It was written for him.
Yeah. So, and then the clip we're about to see, what he does in this is, if I'm right, is the 10th thing, isn't it? Yeah.
We've shortened it a little bit, but yeah. Well, we had to. Look, we've still got 2 films to go. Yeah. Shall we have a look at the clip?
You're editing my work.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I can't believe this.
Yeah. Amy did it actually.
Yeah.
Okay. If we can have the Field in England clip. But I mean, the thing that's amazing about that sequence, I do need to move on, is it the idea that you have no idea what's done to him in the tent, and it's one of those sequences where, because you don't know, it makes it all the more terrifying. I have a theory that Stuart Rogers in the tent when he...
It is him. It's
him.
the whole of the Curzon cinema with Stuart Rogers. It's just like that, an infinite tent.
Just say briefly about the music, because I
it was Blank Mass.
Right.
A track called Chernobyl, and it was basically what happened was we'd shot that day, and again what I was doing was editing this in the evenings in the hotel. So we got the thing out in the edit suite that was set up in the hotel room, and Andy Stark came in and he went, I think we should put Blank Mass Chernobyl over this. And I went, oh, what's that then? And he goes, oh, here it is. And he put it on, and basically, and it's his fault, because as a producer he told me I couldn't have any commercial music on this film because the budget was too low. And he put it on, and we all sat there in the room and went, fucking hell, all right. And that was it, and it never came off. That was all it was ever going to be, which was fantastic.
Yeah,
you know.
it's brilliant. All right, let's move on to High Rise. Two films to go.
2 films to go.
Two
Come on,
films to
guys.
go.
We
Come
can
on,
do this together. Come on. We're almost there.
Almost there. So, I mean...
He's skipping over the Doctor Who episode.
You told me to.
He got a cinema release. 7
all
films,
right,
man.
don't start getting all pissy. So, I mean, High Rise is really the biggie. And I remember speaking to you with this. Obviously, it's Ballard. I mean, we can't get away from it, but it's Ballard, isn't it?
It is, very much so,
and it's a big art. I mean, we haven't mentioned too many filmmakers, but we did mention Nick Rogue, who was originally going to do High Rise in the 70s with Jeremy Thomas, who was the producer on High Rise. I remember being impressed by when I spoke. You didn't seem at all daunted by approaching this. You seemed, you were convinced you could put... I mean, it's a big challenge, isn't it? Because there's people that are inevitably going to say, oh, he hasn't filmed the book. How did you deal with that? Was there added pressure, or did you just decide not to worry about it?
I don't know. I'm probably just stupid, and it was kind of, I didn't think about it. I mean, there was pressure, obviously. The book's hard to adapt, for starters, so Amy had a real trial doing it.
Yeah.
And technically, it's a big film. You know, it's a lot of characters in it, and it's a lot of spaces. You know, and it was the biggest budget I'd ever had up until that point, and. But it was still not enough by quite a sizable chunk, you know, to build all the stuff we needed to build. So it was, but I felt that the approach that we were taking, which was to be as close as the book as possible, we were never going to kind of rip the arse out of the book and change it massively so that it was just a banner atop the film, and then it was something else that we were making. So I felt that if we did that, at least we could defend it, you know. And having never done a book adaptation before, I thought, well, what's the point of adapting a book if you just don't do the book, you know? And so many of these books are everything's completely different. Now, obviously, there's, even in a slim book like High Rise, there's, you know, the script can run massively long, and if you put everything in, you would have a mini-series out of it. So we didn't want that. So some stuff had to go out, but it was... But yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel massively under pressure on it until I'd made it.
Right.
And then I was massively under pressure.
But the interesting thing with that, and to jump forward, I mean, the film came out and it was incredibly well received critically. I think The Guardian compared it to Mike Leigh, but no, I'm kidding. But you know, it was incredibly.
I'd like to see the Mike Leigh High Rise.
Yeah, but it was very well reviewed, but also commercially. I mean, the film was a big success. Did that kind of... Was that sweet? Was that, or did you not worry about that aspect?
No, I was worried about that because we've been throughout the movie, the films I've made, they've always been minded about the budget and getting the budget back to some degree, or at least not costing people loads of money, because you don't get to make another film if you do that. It kind of just stops. And this was quite a lot of money, and it's quite a weird film, so it was worrying. That was worrying me, and it was so brilliant when people came out and saw it, you know, and liked it. Yeah. Some didn't, obviously, but most did, it seemed, you know. And it was like I did this thing with it, which we'd done with Sightseers. I had a taste of it, which was going up the country. I think we did the Sightseers tour, which was like about 8 cinemas, and on High Rise we did 26, and went all up and all over the place, and it was amazing. They were all sold out, and people loved it, and the Q&As were all great, and I was really encouraged by that. I saw the edges of it and going, okay, well, there's a hunger for this kind of cinema. It's like there's a lot of doing down of the audience, it seems, in the press about what they want. But I think there's a definite hunger for stuff that is not that is harder, you know.
And you add something to the book as well. I mean, I think there's a kind of increased with the Thatcher stuff. I mean, you spoke about the political element of Kill List. There is a kind of politics to the film, and it seems to me that the film, even though it's set in the 70s, the novel's in the 70s, you do make it very relevant for a contemporary audience. Was that something that you were keen to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a political book, and you know, but the book is the book, but the film is a reaction, Amy's reaction to the book, you know, and I've got we both have baggage with the 70s, you know, being kids from the 70s and that we were the kids in the tower basically, and like Lang and all those people are the same age as our parents would have been in that time. So it's not just you know, it is as a look back at that and a chance to kind of have a little think about what happened, you know.
And the film also achieves, I think, you said that, you know, it wasn't nearly enough money, but I think there's a very nice balance in the film between the digital effects of the tower and the kind of reality of the tower. Is that something else that you didn't want it to just seem like this kind of fantasy with this? I mean...
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think there was something really nice happened with the effects work where it started, the CG stuff started to look quite painterly, and that was interesting and weirdly period, you know. So that was encouraging. And the thing is, the tower, you know, the tower's not real, and you always know that. So I was toying with the idea of doing some making of stuff where we go out to Eastern Europe and then put the CG tower out there and say we've come here to film this tower, and it was all fake, but just didn't have the energy in the end.
Just gonna, Elaine, how are we doing for time? We're okay? All right. Obviously, Tom Hiddleston, Hiddles, as you used to call him, he's very committed in this role. He gives a very committed performance.
He's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
And was he someone that, as with Reese, did you have him in mind originally when you were Dr. Robert Lang?
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, I went to meet him when he was doing Coriolanus, which was terrifying. So I had to sit through Coriolanus and then have a conversation with him about it afterwards and sound half intelligent.
Yeah.
So I was like in the bar on Wikipedia going, fucking, what is this, man? This is hard, this one. It's much harder than, you know, what does that all mean? Yeah, so that worked out well.
And Jeremy Irons, getting Jeremy Irons, I think it's the best thing Jeremy Irons has done in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, he's quite daunting, Irons, you know, as a director.
Yeah.
You kind of talk to him and go, you know, he's going there. I had to battle with him, you know. He said, I think in this scene I'll wear a Panama hat. All right, fuck. It's a bold choice, Jeremy. I don't know. Maybe not. Those are the kind of in-depth discussions we had.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to mention two other things before we move on to the film. I mean, the clips give it away, but the thing with your films, I like the visceral nature of your work. I can't remember the chip you've closed for this, but obviously where Lang is removing the flesh from the skull. I mean, the sounds and I think you have fun with that, don't you? That side of the filmmaking.
Yeah, I like that stuff. I mean, I think that, you know, I think part of the strategy of all this stuff is a bit of mistrust. You know, you can't really trust me. You don't know what I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
And that was why that scene so early on. You're going, well, we've done the skin peeling off the face. Where to next? You know, I think that's good. And I've seen that in other films, and it's kind of it means you don't have to show too much then. You just set the tone for it, and then everyone just expects it after that.
Yeah. Simmons, the actor that plays Simmons, brings us on to something that we were talking about beforehand.
Dan Skinner,
yeah. Yeah, he's brilliant, and he's in Prevenge.
Yeah.
And I really like
the Ghoul as well.
The Ghoul as well, exactly. Yeah. I really like the fact that you and people like Andy Stark, who I think is one of the great producers that we have in this country, are supporting emerging British filmmakers. I've got a Greasy Strangler badge on, Bullshit Artist, which is a film I like very much. You're getting more involved in that, aren't you? I mean, I know you were involved with the Peter Strickland film, The Ghoul we've mentioned, Prevenge, Greasy Strangler. Do you feel that there is this kind of movement coming through of filmmakers, and do you feel this responsibility as somebody now that has an established career to be supportive of that? Yeah, I definitely think there's a, and it's to do. It might not be a thematic thing, but it's certainly to do with technology. That people are kind of mobilising and making their own movies.
in the same way that we did with Down Terrace. And I've had a lot of people contact me about Down Terrace, and if there's anything I've done, it's to show that you can make a movie off your own back, and it's not, the days of, it's that you can do it you max out your credit cards and you sell your car are over. You can do it for much, much cheaper than that. And I always say to people, just don't get into fucking debt over it. It's not worth it. But you can certainly do it without it hardly costing any money at all, really. And I think these films that you're talking about are that they are in that kind of bracket. They're my favourite types of filmmakers. Self-starters. A lot of these movies come from places where there's no funding. There's no help from any of the funding bodies. They've just been made because they have to be made.
And I think we need that kind of independent voice in British cinema. I mean, we don't. And it's good that it seems to be offering an alternative. There seems to be this groundswell of kind of these collective voices coming through, and I think it's very, very refreshing. I don't know if any of you saw The Ghoul. Any hands for anybody who saw The Ghoul? Okay, Prevenge. Yeah, I mean these are amazing films. Greasy Strangler. Yeah, I love The Greasy Strangler. So and it's good. I think it's good that you're part of that. Anyway, Elaine, how long now? Okay. Free Fire. Nobody will have had a chance to see Free Fire. Free Fire. Oh, you have. Okay. Free Fire is the closing film at this year's London Film Festival. Do you want to just kind of set the context for people? Because obviously, it's going to be released next March from Sheer Canal. Yeah. I love the fact that in Toronto, where it did win the prize, they said your first film made in America, which made me laugh because it's not made in America. Do you want to just set the scene a little bit for Free Fire? Then we'll have the clip, and then we'll come back to some questions from the audience. Yeah,
Free Fire is a film.
Sell it, Ben.
I'm going to sell it hard. This is the elevator pitch for Free Fire. The high energy. This is how I sold it to the studios.
Good, yeah.
It's like a bunch of blokes.
Do you want a cigar?
Yeah. It's like a bunch of guys, and they go to buy some guns. It goes wrong, and they all shoot each other.
Right, succinct. I like it.
Yeah, to the point.
Yeah, to the point.
Hitting all the major demographics there. Guns and blokes and
excellent
shooting.
I'm in. The only question I will ask you about before you see the clip, it's a again from High Rise. It's a kind of step up in that it's a much bigger international cast. I mean, Arnie Hammer and Brie Larson, who obviously won the Oscar. Was that in any way daunting for you, or do you just take that in your stride?
No, I mean the Brie Larson thing's funny because the room hadn't even come out when we made the film.
Right.
So now it's like you kind of bask in the reflective glory of kind of casting an Oscar winner. It's like, she was just really good, and we were just very lucky. So I think, but I'd say it was a comparable cast to High Rise, But it's more of a commercial movie in many ways. It's more action based and it's more of a comedy. So, but yeah, sure we do.
Let's have a look at the Free Fire trailer. I think. Yeah. So Free Fire closes the London Film Festival tomorrow night. I don't know if there's tickets available. If not, you're going to have to wait till March next year when it's released by Studio Canal. So, Elaine, you'll have to tell me when we have to stop. But we have some microphones along the side, I think. So if we can have a show of hands for questions for Ben Wheatley.
It's really painful, and I think that from my point of view, you kind of know. When you know the film and you see the trailers, you know how much is being given away, and you feel like it's really counterintuitive. You just go fuck, but then it is something where you're trying to get people to go and watch the film, so you want to put the best bits in the trailer so people go and see it. So you're really caught on the horns of a dilemma there, And it's a similar thing with posters. It's like I know what a good poster looks like, a really cool poster, but a poster that gets people to go to a cinema looks very different from that. So you end up with something that isn't necessarily the coolest thing ever because it's a tool, And if you stand in the way of the marketing department and get under their feet, and then the film underperforms because of that, you're a fool, And it's a real problem. And the audience is more important in a way than that. But I know what you mean. I mean, the problem there's a cultural issue in terms of American and UK trailers as well. Like American trailers are 2.5 minutes now. They're getting longer and longer and longer. But I don't know what I don't know what the answer is to it really. I'm the same as you. I just tend not to watch them, or try to. So I don't know. Yeah.
The posters for this film are great, though, aren't they?
They're lovely. Yeah.
Really good collectible.
Well, I mean, the scripts have the genesis of all the scripts are usually it's something I want to see. So, and that's that. And then between Amy and I, we kind of like we try not to repeat ourselves too much. Then there's the opportunity to make all kinds of cinema. So why would you just repeat yourself again and again and again? But then there's a commercial reality of what will get financed. So there's lots of scripts, but what is actually going to get made is something I don't really have massive amounts of control of. I can put the scripts out there and go, do you want to make this one? And they'll go, yeah. And then you go, what about this one? Go, oh yeah, we'll do this one. So I think there's, that gives I think that's it. That's the answer.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think I feel it's a kind of an uncomfortableness with the world that we're in. I mean, it's magic as in, occult stuff in the films, but the magic is this magic. What the fuck's this? How can you hear me from there? How's that work? I don't know how it works. If it broke, I couldn't fix it. I would have no chance. Or a television. How do planes stay in the air? They weigh fucking 10 tons. It doesn't make any sense, any of it. And I think that's the problem at the heart of this thing we're in. It's like a bubble, and we're kind of like babies floating through it. We don't know how any of this shit works. So yeah, that's what it is for me. And I kind of think about it, and I've been thinking about for a long time about how, what's the version of me from 300 years ago or 1,000 years ago, and I probably would have been the same basic unit, but it's and I can imagine, I've got little arms and quite broad feet, so I would have been trolling around in a field somewhere picking up potatoes or something like that, or with a pike, terrified in some terrible war and killed really quickly, and I think that's, but the modern society is like this weird bubble where we kind of think that we're like this, I'm sure you think the same way, that I feel when I die, you're all going to wink out of existence. It's like that we're so the centre of everything, and we're not. That's my rambling answer. That's why I make films. It's easier to make those. I mean, some of it's to do with budget. I don't just make films. I've kind of done a lot of TV and I've done a lot of adverts as well. And so the kind of the slickness side of it is just a muscle that I have not been able to flex because we just never had any money. Filmed in England was the first film we ever even had a tracked on. Like that shot that we saw there is Reese comes out on the thing and it moves smoothly along. If you were to be standing where Reese was and looking at how we were achieving that, it was a ladder that was bought from B&Q, and it was something that Laurie Rose had bought off the internet for 30 quid that sat on the ladder, and we rolled it along, and he was operating going like that, so that. But by the time we get to High Rise was the first time we had a budget that we could build anything, so we built sets and had cranes and stuff. And so that does affect the way that the shots are put together. But the actual crew is the same, and the ethos is the same, working the same way. And both High Rise and Free Fire are shot in the lit in the round, really. They're lit 360 in the same way that all the other movies have been. So, yeah, that's it. But then when you're saying about the kind of one's in a building and one's in a factory, or whatever it is. So also one's in a field, one's in a caravan, one's in a house, one's in a series of in one house in a series of hotel rooms. So I've kind of totally fallen into that trap of making films stuck in small spaces. And it was only highlighted to me the other day in an interview. I was like, "Fuck! I can't find my way out of this. It's just self-evident." So yeah.
Do one in a maze next.
I don't know. Yeah.
There we are, your next idea.
There we go. Again, like we were saying, it was lit 360, so that the light was... We wanted to be on location in the past, so every set had ceilings on it. They won't fly away. There was no lights, artificial lighting coming through. It was mainly lit from the artificial sun from outside that was coming through the windows. There was a general plan of breakdown, of how the tracking and the gripped style of approach worked versus the handheld, which is something I've done in all the films, well, all the TV I've done, of bouncing backwards, forwards between those two positions, and certainly the last couple of movies have been like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it wasn't, a lot of it's just feeling it in the moment, you know. There's plans and storyboards and drawings and stuff, but a lot of it's just emotion. You feel them, you try and feel the emotion in the room, and then I'm filtering. I'm hoping that will filter then through Laurie in the way that he moves, you know, and experiences it. So there's a lot of it is kind of intuition, really.
Okay, we are going to have to end it there. Before we do, thank you to Studio Canal, who are releasing High Rise. Sorry, it's been a long day.
Last year.
Yeah, it was last year. They did that one though as
They
well,
did
didn't they?
do
So
that
I'm
one, yeah,
sort of
yeah,
right.
fair enough.
Studio Canal will be releasing Free Fire next March. Thank you to Rook Films as well. As I said, Andy Stark here, one of the great producers that we've got. Go and see the films that Ben and he are involved with. Thank you to Elaine and the BFI London Film Festival staff. And also, they never get thank you. Thank you to the projectionists, I think did a very good job with the clips.
Yeah.
Thank you to the audience, but most of all, thank you to Ben for coming and speaking so entertainingly about his career.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Cheers. Thank you.